These are my top 10 favorite books, and in this video, I'll let you know why I love them so much and why I think you should read them too. Thank you especially to those of you who've been supporting this channel for years, and for those of you who have supported my writing career and bought Fumes. The criteria for this video is pretty simple. These are actually my top 10 favorite books right now in this moment in 2025, and a prerequisite for any of these is that I had to have read them cover to cover at least twice. I'm really looking forward to sharing these titles with you all. And if you get something out of the video, I'd appreciate a like. It goes a long way. If you haven't subscribed yet, consider doing so. I don't know where I'd be in my life without what we talk about when we talk about love by Raymond Carver. I have reread these stories more than any others at this point. And I started reading these stories at a low point in life, and probably that's why they've stuck with me so long. I first started reading these stories when I was about 19 years old. I had a particularly rough go of college, my first year or so, and these stories helped get me through that time. Raymond Carver is an absolutely legendary short story writer, and if you haven't read any of his stuff before, you need to check it out, and I think this is the best place to start. I absolutely love The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt too. If you didn't grow up reading the Harry Potter books, probably you won't have quite the same love for this book that I do, even if you've finished it. I don't want to give anything away about this novel or any of the other books I'm going to be talking about, but what I will say is The Goldfinch is kind of like a grown-up Harry Potter. The main character's best friend even jokingly calls him Potter. It's hard to explain succinctly why I love this book, but what I will say is it took me a couple tries to get into it, but once I got past about the 150, 200 page mark, I loved it. The back half of the novel is my favorite part, and the friendships between the main character, who's also the narrator, and some of the other main characters are really well written, and they stick with me. I think about those friendships often. Okay, so that's one long novel and one short story collection. Dennis Johnson is one of Raymond Carver's proteges, and two of Dennis Johnson's works make this list. I've revisited these titles that much over the years that there have to be two Dennis Johnson works on my top 10. Train Dreams by Dennis Johnson is the best novella I've ever read. It's a period piece and it's a beautiful read. The most impressive thing about this story is how epic the scale is, even though the length of the story is pretty short. On the syllabus for the first fiction workshop I ever took in college were two stories from Jesus' Son by Dennis Johnson. So I was assigned these stories initially, but I loved both of them, Work and Emergency, from this short story collection. Bought the collection, and I don't know how many times I've reread these stories since, but I could probably quote a lot of Work at this point. I've reread Work like 15 to 20 times over the years. I've been thinking about this list for a long time because I wanted to get it right, and this is the title that most surprised me, Pedro Paramo by Juan Rulfo. I was also assigned this in college, and at first I didn't get it at all, but in hindsight, what I've realized is that this was both my introduction to Juan Rulfo and Susan Sontag. There's an introduction by Susan Sontag, and I've really enjoyed reading Sontag's essays since then. But the reason why Pedro Paramo makes this list is because I still feel like I don't fully get it 5 reads later. It is a beautiful, mystical, mysterious meditation on family, and I continue to get a lot out of it. If you haven't read this, you gotta check it out because it's one of the foundational works of Latin American literature. Love this story. The extra benefits to reading this thing are that it's pretty short and it'll help you gain a much better perspective on Latin American literature in general once you've finished it. It's influenced quite a lot of works that have come after it, including 100 Years of Solitude, which I still have not yet read. This is one of the best page turners in my top 10 list here, and it's one of the best thrillers I've ever read. The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo by Stieg Larsson. I just love the way this book makes me feel once I start getting into reading it. The main character is trying to solve a mystery, basically, and he drinks a lot of coffee. He sleeps around a little bit. He smokes cigarettes. It's in a cold, wintry setting, and the payoff of the plot is great. Also, the character of Lisbeth Salander is pretty badass, and I don't know, I just love this story. I've reread it 5 or 6 times at this point, and I'll probably reread it again this winter if I have time. I loved This Is How You Lose Her when I first read these short stories in college, particularly the last story in this collection. Over time, my favorite story in the collection has shifted as I've changed as a person, but The Sun, the Moon, the Stars, which is one story, is my favorite here. It's the first one in this collection. Which brings us to Freedom by Jonathan Franzen. I have some personal ties to this one that make it that much more interesting to me. One of the main characters attends the University of Virginia, which is also where I went to school. I think this novel strikes a good balance between being very accessible, like you won't find this to be a slog as you're going through it, but also it maintains a high literary standard. It's just a great read. I love Hemingway's fiction, and his style has definitely influenced the way that I think, the way that I approach reading and writing in some ways as well. But it's A Movable Feast by Ernest Hemingway that I go back to the most. I think for reasons similar to why I love The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo so much. This book just puts me in a good headspace. It sort of reminds me of who I am and how I've looked at life and writing over the years. And I definitely do romanticize this time period in literary history. All of those expats who formed a network in Paris in the 1920s. I wouldn't count Midnight in Paris as one of my absolute favorite movies, but I've watched that a handful of times as well. If you've made it this far through the video, I really appreciate your support. I'm working on a full-length novel right now called Up 29. More fiction is coming. My full-time job is pretty demanding, which limits the amount of time that I can write, read, and make some content. And also, on a much more exciting note, I'm getting married this year. So I'll be a married man as of October 2025, which is pretty cool. But trust that more fiction is on the way. I'm never going to stop writing. The last book, which rounds out my top 10 list, is Cities of the Plain by Cormac McCarthy. This is the third book in the Border trilogy, so you definitely should read all the Pretty Horses and The Crossing first. Cities of the Plain I go back to a lot. I think it's because of the time in my life when I read it and the nature of the romantic relationship between John Grady Cole, the main character in this novel, and his love interest. I know that this is not the first Cormac McCarthy novel that most people point to when they think of which one's their favorites, but these are not the novels I think are objectively the top 10 greatest, best works. No, these are just my 10 favorite books right now. If and when this list changes significantly, and I'm sure it will, I'll make a follow-up video, but I definitely don't anticipate making a my top 10 books type of video any more often than every few years or so. These are my 10 favorites right now. I've enjoyed the hell out of them, and I hope you do too. Happy reading, take care, and I'll see you in the next one.